Hi, Twila.
Hi.
Hey, I'm just setting up the camera here. Trying to get it looking right.
I put that one curtain down too. I thought it might be a little bright.
Great. All right. I think that's fine. Okay.
I'm sure someone in like TV something would have some better lighting advice for me, but
Yes. We're just going with
not one
simple.
of my areas of expertise.
Yes. Make sure the volume's all the way up on here. Okay. And I am recording. Okay, cool. So, all right, let's pretend we're just talking again for the first time.
Great.
If we can. So, first of all, thanks for taking the time to chat with me. And go ahead and just tell me about who you are and what work you do.
So I'm primarily a glaciologist. I work at the National Snow and Ice Data Center. That's part of the University of Colorado. And I specialize in understanding contemporary changes, so what's happening today, the last few decades, mostly on the Greenland ice sheet, and a little bit in parts of Alaska or Antarctica.
And how'd you get into this kind of work? Why ice? Why snow? Why glaciers?
Well, I've always been a person who really liked earth sciences. I've always been a scientist. And in college, I had an opportunity to go and see a large valley glacier in Nepal. I was doing a study abroad period, and I saw that glacier, this long, sinuous river of ice, and you could just hear it melting. You could hear rocks moving, all of these bits, and I just thought, yep, I'm going to be a glaciologist. And that was that.
So is that like your official title, glaciologist?
Yes.
What in general would you say is happening with glaciers? Like in your opinion, Joe Schmo off the street walks up to you and says, "Hey, Twila, what's happening with glaciers today? Like right now?"
Well, really there's one answer. We're losing ice. It's not particularly surprising. I mean, just imagine you take the ice out of your freezer, you start heating up the air around it, or you put it in a warm bath, a warm ocean of your drink, and that ice is going to disappear. And we're literally doing the same thing. So we're warming up our planet, we're warming up the air, we're warming up the ocean, and we're losing ice.
Okay. And what would you say is the most effective thing that, like before that person on the street who you just say that to walks away, if you could give them one piece of advice of something they could do to try to help that not happen, because obviously it's not great for us if that continues, is there any way you could describe what that would be?
Well, the number one thing is to be aware that this is happening and find points of action. And points of action can be as simple as voting for someone who understands that this is happening and wants to make changes. So literally all you're doing is checking a box on a voter ballot. You could write letters or make phone calls to people in office to say, hey, this is important to me. I understand we're losing ice, and I think we should make some actions to try and stop this. Mm-hmm. Or people can become, much more involved politically. You can also become, that doesn't have to be at national levels or even state levels. It can also just be local, where you might go to your school, your community group, people like that, and say, hey, I understand we're losing ice. This is connected to the way we're living our lives. Why don't we think about getting some solar panels on our church or simple things like that too? So it's being aware of it and then choosing any number of levels of action.
Okay, awesome.
Well, getting ready to head home. we're headed home, but the science is staying here. See a weather station down there and the terminus of LeConte. Up Glacier, several more instruments, a few items down there, headed home. Behind that big rock we have a automatic camera, time-lapse camera. And then as we come around, we've got our seismic set up in here, hidden in that rock pile. Behind it up there, GPS, temperature. And down here, looking back down into the fjord, you can see 3 more time-lapse cameras set up, so they take in this view all the way from down fjord, up through the whole plume area, sediment output, along that glacier, and then the 4th camera gets that whole view up glacier so that we can look at pixel tracking velocities there. So, signing off from an installation here at LeConte.
So I don't know a lot about climate change. Like I shared earlier, I've seen the video online where the chunk of ice the size of Manhattan broke off, and I did watch Chasing Ice. But beyond that, like I shared before, I honestly kind of felt like maybe there were maybe 15 or 20 scientists internationally who are like really focused on this issue. How wrong am I? How many...
I would say you're orders of magnitude off. So put several more, maybe more than several zeros behind that number. So even right at the National Snow and Ice Data Center, we already have tens of scientists who are thinking about snow and ice. And if you're thinking about snow and ice in the modern day context, you're thinking about climate change. We simply can't separate these different parts of the Earth system. And the National Snow and Ice Data Center is just one place in the U.S. where this kind of work happens. So we also have the Polar Science Center at the University of Washington. We have a Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska that studies these kinds of issues. We have a Polar Center at Ohio State University. There's a Polar Center at Penn State University. So there's lots, and that's just, handful off the top of my head. And that's just within the U.S. Every other nation that is active in science is also studying these. So I have colleagues who do work in large groups in Copenhagen, in France, across the UK, in China. So it's really people in Chile who are studying things in Patagonia or in Antarctica. Australia has a lot of interest in Antarctic science and ice there. So it's truly a global scientific community.
It's obvious to most people that there's a big division in our culture between if this science is real or if it's not. Have you witnessed from working internationally or meeting other people from other countries that in their country it's not divided like that? What country would you say stands out to you as being undivided that yes, it's climate change is real?
Well, unfortunately, every other country on the planet, for the most part, is less divided than the U.S.
Really?
The U.S. Has really politicized this issue much more than other countries. So other countries, the governing parties recognize that climate change is happening, but the discussion is, how much do we care about it? What are we going to do? What types of action we're going to do? So the science is accepted as far as this is a thing that is happening. Wow. And they've moved on to this point of discussion about how important it is or what should be done about it and how. Unfortunately, because it's become such a political issue in the U.S., the American Republican Party is one of the only political parties in the world that has a strong position in government and does not accept the science of what is happening. That's not to say that I don't think we should be having discussions about what we do about it, but it's really sad to me that the science that it's happening is not just widely accepted. I don't see a reason that shouldn't be a bipartisan agreement.
Wow. Okay, that's sobering information. Can you say, you said you have been able to spend some time out in the field, but a lot of your research also happens just behind a computer screen because, crunching the numbers. But where have you had a chance to travel to where you've seen glaciers, especially ones that we might be able to show photos of?
Yeah. Well, I've spent time on the Greenland ice sheet, doing work there. I've spent time doing work in Alaska, studying glaciers there and teaching about glaciers there. But I also spend time visiting glaciers, during my free time. So I've seen glaciers in the Alps where I've literally stood next to the rock that has my birth year on it, and that's where the glacier was then, and now the glacier is, way over there.
Whoa.
And the same thing of glaciers in Canada. I'm in Montana. There's big issues with losing glaciers in Glacier National Park, of course, the namesake of the national park. So there are many examples, and I've gotten to see a lot myself, which is both exciting and sad.
Okay. One last question before we go. Let me check my timer here. All right, we got 9 minutes. So, because I'm trying to keep this brief. When we first started chatting, you mentioned that you're working on a proposal with NASA and something about the cryosphere. Could you tell us what that is and what it's all about?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the cryosphere is all the ice and snow and frozen bits on the Earth, so glaciers, sea ice, permafrost, snow. And NASA has a wonderful array of satellite data, airplane-based measurements, even some fieldwork data that we can use to understand what's happening in the cryosphere. Cool. And so almost every year they'll put out a call for research proposals, and we can send in our best ideas about what we want to know. And they usually say, these are problems we're focusing on. So right now, some of the problems we're focusing on are understanding how sea ice is changing and how that's going to be influenced by changes in the ocean, understanding how land ice is changing because it's the loss of land ice that causes sea level rise, and understanding too how as we lose land ice, that puts more fresh water into the ocean. And we have to understand, what does that do in the ocean?
So basically they've got I guess the sensing equipment that can provide lots of data, and you all send your proposals to them and say, hey, can you guys give me data on this kind of thing? Is that how it works?
So it can work that way. They have it's hard to describe even how much data NASA has, both data that they've collected as well as data that's planned for things coming up. So there are many different topics that we might be able to study with them. So for example, I've said to them, they have some imagery from satellites.
Right.
I want to be able to use that satellite data. They have measurements of ocean conditions around Greenland. I want to be able to use those measurements. They also have measurements of how thick the ice sheet is. I want to be able to use those. So you come up with a real plan to use this data to answer these questions we care about.
Oh, okay. So individual universities, of course, it'd be hard for them to have a satellite in space taking this stuff. But NASA's got all this warehoused information, and so this is a channel for them to get that information out to you all. Okay, got it.
Well, and it's really, in many cases, the data is freely available.
Okay.
But we need time to be able to work with it, and we need a
Okay.
plan to get us to be able to answer those important questions. So this is our chance as scientists to say, this is the plan I have. Here I'm fully demonstrating how I'm going to do it, that I do have the resources, that I do have the expertise, and then it's actually going to help us answer these important questions.
Right. Well, let's see. I got enough time to say goodbye? Yes. Cool. We landed that. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and let's see. I think that's it. I'm gonna stop the camera and then we'll chat.
Great.